Let's talk about how to make your game look like a cartoon. Hi, I'm Mike, and today let's go over what it takes to give your game a cartoonish style. There's actually a couple of distinct elements that we'll cover here before we hop into Godot, where I'll show you a quick way to implement the shading side of things using the basic spatial material that is available to you within Godot. So the two things that we need to think about when talking about a cartoon style are the character design and the lighting. Oftentimes cartoons have exaggerated proportions or large heads, smaller bodies, or move in ways that humans just physically can't. And this is kind of something that's important to keep in mind for if you're trying to actually have a game that looks exactly like a cartoon, you're going to need to factor in the character design in that way. Another thing we need to consider for cartoon styles is lighting, particularly how the shadows work. In most cartoons, it's done by what is referred to as cel-shading. So it's a single line, basically, where the shadow hits that is a different color from the rest of the object where the light is. Occasionally you'll have another level of light on top of that that's showing more of a proximity to a light source that will change the color again, but they are distinct, clean lines. Whereas in a lot of the default rendering options for most of the game engines out there, it's done in a physically based rendering style, so it's trying to approximate how light behaves in real life. So you'll find a lot more gradients and shallow fall-offs between light and shadowed areas on your objects. So if we have a toon shading but realistic character designs, realistic being a sort of looser term here, we get something that looks a lot more like the Borderlands series, where the humanoids are roughly realistically proportioned, and there's the cel-shaded style graphics on top. So there's harsh shadows and not a whole lot of gradients between light and dark areas. The inverse of that would be something like Overwatch, where the characters are a little bit more exaggerated, but the lighting system in Overwatch is more physically based rendering. So there's a lot more gradients between light and dark areas on character models. And then the final one, where we have both the cartoonish styles and cel shading, would be something like Wind Waker, where Link is very clearly has cartoon proportions and also has this sharp line between light and dark, where the light is clearly divided from the shadows. So now that we have that basic knowledge in place for what you're trying to aim for and the different things you'll need to consider, let me show you how to easily achieve a pretty decent effect of cel shading, basically, within the Godot game engine using the default spatial material. So here we are in Godot. This is just the basic demo scene that I will be using to show off at the end. There's the 3 bears that I've created prior to this that are already hooked up to these buttons, so they will show in the demo. But let me show you how to set up some basic cel shading using Godot's default 3D spatial material. Here we have my bear friend model with the textures that I applied in Blender, just as a rough idea of what I was looking at. And we'll add a surface material override. Again, just the basic standard 3D spatial material. And then let's scroll down and change the color. And the option that we're looking for is right here under shading. If we take a look at this, we see we have these options here for how the material is going to interact with light that is hitting it. And there's a Toon Shader option. So let's select that for the shader. Now you can see here, there's not really a whole lot of difference between the toon shading and the default one that it started on. And that's because at the moment, the roughness is turned up all the way. So that means that it's going to diffuse as much as possible and make the gradient between light and dark as smooth as possible. So if we turn that down all the way, we get a nice distinct line between the light and dark areas of our object. So the next thing that we want to change is the specular of the material. So if we go back up to the top where we chose the toon shading, we can choose how it renders the specular, which is the reflection of any light source. And if we select toon, we get these nice large blobs of color, which, because this bear is a matte color, my personal visual preference is that if it's a matte object that's not supposed to reflect any light, I like to turn this off and just disable the specular option. Now another thing that we can look at here is if we go down here to the rim effect, we can give the bear some backlighting or some rim lighting to make it pop out a bit more, to make it so that we can see a little bit more of the details on the model. In this case, I don't particularly like the look for this object here, especially in this lighting. It doesn't work for me so much, so I'm just going to leave that disabled, but just know that that's an option for you if that is something that you're looking to achieve. And then if we turn on a light here, just add a light to the scene and move it around, we can see how it affects the cel-shaded material. We can see that the light itself also has a sharp, defined edge as it travels around the bear. Now there are other Toon Shader options out there. There are several that you can find at GodotShaders.com. This one in particular is Complete Cel Shader for Godot 4 by eldskald. It was a bit more of an involved setup process, and this is, with the time I was able to invest into this video, the best that I could make it look. The color is, interestingly, the same hex value as the other materials, but it looks very different in this context.
And then as a final touch, I've added a quad mesh here to add post-processing outline shader, just to give it that extra little bit of pizzazz for a cartoon look.
And that's how we would achieve a very simple cel-shaded look using the default spatial material in Godot. I was working in Godot 4, but the same steps do apply to Godot 3. The only difference being that you'd have to get a Godot 3 compatible outline shader for that final step if that's the look that you're going for. If you made it this far in the video and you've learned something, hitting the like button is a great way to help get this video to a wider audience. I have another video kind of going the other way, talking about how to achieve a pixelated look very easily in Godot as well, that you can find here. And that's it for me for now. So thank you so much for watching. Good luck with your projects, and I will see you next time. Take care.